I am Rachel Humphrey with It's Personal Stories, a hospitality podcast. We are a nonprofit dedicated to empowering personal success within the hospitality industry. And I'm very excited to be joined today by Georgine Muntz, the CEO of Visual Matrix. Georgine, welcome to the program.
Hi, Rachel. Thank you so much for having me.
We are going to jump right in. Everybody knows I run out of time every single time I do one of the interviews because I get so excited talking to people and learning more about them. But I want to start with your journey to leadership because you are not a lifelong hospitality industry executive. Talk a little bit about your background, how you got into hospitality, and if there were any pivotal moments in your path to leadership that you think have really shaped things for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go way back to start and then I'll jump forward to how I got into hospitality from a 25-year career in various other industries. But the way back story is I was raised by a single mother. She had 4 children, and obviously that's a bit of a struggle for all kinds of reasons. So I ended up in 12 different schools over 8 years by the 8th grade. And then at that point, I ended up living with my grandparents for junior high and high school. And the reason I bring that up is because I think in hindsight and maybe some wisdom at this age at 55, that it shaped my ability to quickly adapt and to meet people, build relationships, and solve problems in different ways than I might if I had grown up in one school and one place for my whole career. So my husband likes to call me a gypsy. If I'm somewhere for too long, I feel the urge to do something different. And in my career, that's been to find new problems, new companies, new industries. I've had 10 different industries. Really, it's probably a little bit more than that because I was in consulting and I got to see several industries, but I've been through a lot of industries. So I think that has shaped a lot about me and how I operate. And then more recently, going from what was most of my career in auto finance and founding one of my own companies in auto finance, a loan origination system, I ended up in working for a company called Alpine Investors and Alpine Software Group. They found me when I was exiting my company back in 2018. So they hired me to run a company, a software company here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. They were looking for a seasoned, experienced executive who knew software. And in DFW, it's not nearly as common to find those types of people here as it might be in San Francisco, where my company is based. So I started working with this company with them, and two years into that role, they purchased a company called Visual Matrix. And this is unbelievably odd and crazy, but it was 3 miles away from the company that I was already running for them, which was in childcare software. Some of the leaders at Alpine approached me and said, "Hey, Georgine, would you mind running both companies for just 3 months until we can find a CEO to run Visual Matrix?" Because the founder, David Awad, who had been in the industry for a long time, was ready to retire. And I said, "Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'll definitely do that." Although I was very entrenched in the other company I was leading, started doing that. And after about 3 months went by, I realized that I absolutely loved hospitality. Primarily because of the people, the clients that are in the business. And a lot of those are hotel owners, general managers, management groups, franchises. So I would rather keep going with this company and find somebody to backfill me at the other software company. So that's what ended up happening. And I'm so thankful that it did, because I'm now, crazy to say, 5 years in, I still feel like a newbie because I know most people in this industry never leave and they will end up with 10, 20, 30 years experience, but loving it and got here in a fortunate path that I would never have expected.
I love that. And I'm a big fan of the sliding doors theory, that if you say yes to opportunities, really incredible things that are unexpected can come. But you touched on some really important leadership topics in talking about that. And one of them I want to start with is building relationships, because you talked about this industry, which people can be 10, 20, 30, 40 years in, and the relationships are really important for a lot of reasons. But you're entering an industry later in your career with a lot of experience in your substantive area, but maybe not the relationships and connections that a lot of people will see driving the industry forward. How have you set out in that? Is it, gosh, it's got to be almost more than 5 years now, I think.
Yeah, we're just getting over 5, like getting into your 6. Yep.
How have you set out to build those relationships in the industry? And do you have any of your character traits, personality traits that you think you lean into in trying to build those relationships?
Great question. I think one is that experience in multiple industries and deep experience in one industry had me come in with this understanding that one, I need to understand the software that we're building for customers. And then two, I need to understand the customer's needs, how they use the software. So I started there. And then I quickly realized that I don't have the connections that I need to be able to make the phone calls or the meetings that I need to make to move things forward. And that comes from experience and then from getting out there and trying. And one, we were talking a little bit about David Kong, because Best Western is a big client of ours. I didn't even have the ability to call David and say, hey, David, I'm Georgine and I'm new to this industry, because he's, who is this person? I don't know her. So I quickly reached out to someone that I knew through auto finance that was tied to hospitality. And I told them my problem. And I said, hey, I need to develop an executive advisory board so that I can have people who do have those relationships help me navigate and build relationships with those people that I would have already had I been in the industry for 10 or 15 years. And that turned out working really fabulously. Dwayne was one of the first people. He's head of IBM over hospitality, and he pulled in Flo Lugli, who was one of the first on my advisory board. Absolutely love her. She's retired, much like you're retired, Rachel. I think she works as hard as ever, but she's retired, and she advised me to grab a few other people. And I ended up with Flo, Shane Platt, who was a friend of one of my colleagues, and then also Sinjin Murphy, who's been in the industry for a long time. So I end up with this opportunity to work with these great longtime industry players who know anyone. Like between the three of them, if I say, hey, do you know someone at Wyndham? Who should I talk to? One of those three will say, oh yeah, I know so-and-so, that's who you need to talk to there, or this is who you need to talk to at Hyatt. So it ended up quickly growing my network, or my ability to have a network immediately. And I think that's crucial, because I think it applies to every industry, at least every one I've been involved with. But I think hospitality, even maybe a level higher, that the relationships are first over everything else. And having that ability to branch out through that group has been priceless.
What an important lesson, too, that you identified very quickly. That was an area that you were going to need to develop, and knowing how to do it and relying on others who really had it, instead of being intimidated by people who may have large networks, leaning in and developing those relationships. So I really love that. Tied to that is this idea of, while your company came to you to ask you to step individual matrix for what looked to be a short amount of time, when you decided that's maybe where you wanted to pursue full-time, there is a big risk. There's a risk in leaving, in going to a new industry, developing those new relationships, learning a new product. Would you describe yourself as someone who easily takes risks? How do you assess them? Or what is your really philosophy on how you tackle risks?
Because of the way I grew up, all these different schools, different cities, different places, I think that I don't even think of some things as a risk, which sounds silly to say out loud now that I'm saying it. But really, I didn't even think of it as a risk. I thought of it as an opportunity. And I love learning new things, new challenges. Now, the risk, and I did pay a bit of a price here, was my manager at the other software company that I was running, my board mainly. They weren't very happy because now they have more work to do to replace me in that role. So that was the risk that I was facing in this challenge. For me, once I got to, once I got to understand what was going on at Visual Matrix and the opportunity there, I was all in. Like, I didn't even think of it as a risk. I thought of it as an amazing opportunity, because when I got under the covers in hospitality, I realized that hospitality is probably 10, maybe more years behind in technology. And that is where I really light up when I see all these problems and a lot of people who need solutions that technology can solve. I'm excited about that. So I didn't think of this particular item as a risk, other than having to tell my boss that I wanted to go do a different job, not the one that he thought I should be doing or that he initially hired me to do. So that was the risk. I just thought about it from their perspective and built my case and told them that I would definitely help them find my backfill. I ended up doing both companies for a year. So in the long run, they got a great deal out of that.
It's really important to think too that the mindset is a lot of the way that you tackle risk. So instead of risk, if you think about it as an opportunity, you're already starting off with a positive mindset, which can make such a difference. I am intrigued though by your timing. When we're talking about this 5-6 year window, you are obviously stepping into hospitality during the pandemic, and it is a time of incredible disruption and stress and uncertainty and all of these other words. How do you think your leadership evolved during that time? What about you either said, I've got this and I'm ready to lead, especially in a new industry? Or how did you tackle the different challenges that came your way from a leadership standpoint?
I was running both companies through pandemic. I came into Visual Matrix in November, and everything really came through in March. So they had already gone through a good bit of the first part without me under David, the founder. But the things that evolved for me during the pandemic at both companies, and Visual Matrix in particular, is this realization that even I was scared. Like, I think everybody was scared about the pandemic and what did it mean? What did it mean for my health, my family, my career, the business, our industry, all of those things. That fear was in my head. And I realized that the best thing for the team that I'm leading is to make sure that they know they're not alone. Like, we're all a bit scared here, but we've got each other. We've got our customers who are also scared, who need us to be there for them. So one of the really wonderful things that I think David did before he left and during the pandemic is he didn't lay off a single person. He kept his entire team in place, and he had to he tried to maintain his revenue so that he could keep his team in place and do as minimal as he could on dropping revenue and customers so that he could keep everyone in place, and then also serve the customers full time 24/7, just like he was before the pandemic. So I think just being transparent and open and honest about our fears, and then having a lot of communication, more communication than I normally would. I would have a meeting every week with entire team. Of course, it was on Zoom at the time, talking to them about what's going on. What do we know now? What are the best practices now? And letting them talk to and share that with each other so that we had a feeling of community, even though it was isolating to be at home without your team. So it was just a hodgepodge of things like that we were able to do and manage to get through it in a really great way. We did also take a lot of that time to learn more and build things. During the pandemic, David and the team at Visual Matrix started, and I was able to finish some new features that they'd always wanted to build. And because everything was so quiet operationally, they were able to go out and just build some additional tools and roll them out to the industry. Like, one of them was a revenue manager, really needed in the pandemic, because on a dime, something would be canceled or something would be started. Like, you would have a concert that was supposed to be happening and your hotel would be booked. And the next thing you know, the concert canceled and you have zero. And so they needed an automated way to change their rates and availability quickly so that they could pick up some business when they lost other business. So it was in some ways a blessing. It allowed us to do some things we probably would have taken a lot longer to do otherwise.
I love the concept of sharing too, the vulnerability and the honesty of leadership and saying we're all in this together. We're all scared. And I think that's been one of the beautiful things to actually come out of the pandemic is much more vulnerable, authentic leadership and seeing how that's done. Georgine, any leader will tell you, you do not get to any positions within the C-suite or other leadership positions without facing challenges along the way. And I want to word this one a little bit differently, just as opposed to what overcoming any obstacles, what strategies you use. Have you ever had that moment where you're like, oh my gosh, this is the end of the world. I've done whatever, or I have been unsuccessful at whatever, something that you needed to talk with your own management team about, maybe the board you report to. I'm curious how you, specifics aside, that like figure out, okay, this has not gone how I intended it to go. There are other people that need to know that. How you prepare for those type of conversations. And then as a manager or as a leader, how you respond when others bring that same type of information to you.
Yeah, it's scarred into my memory. Those things don't leave easily.
Oh, sorry about that. That was not my intention.
No, absolutely. But then in hindsight, like everything, I've learned so much from it and I'm thankful. But I was a consulting manager for a consulting firm, and we were working at a local manufacturer that builds those igloo dog, implementing a whole new system. It was everything from sales, marketing, manufacturing, and financials. We were replacing the whole system in a big bang type implementation, which I don't recommend, but that's what we were doing. That's what I was assigned to do. And I was the project manager, so leading a team of 10 or so consultants, and then a client team of another 20 or so people in technology. And we worked for a year and a half, tested everything, got everything ready, cut over the system, which is running the customers of this client were like Kmart, Walmart, Sam's Club, really big customers. We cut over, and after about 5 hours, the system just literally locked up. It could not handle the volume. It was not ready for prime time. It was pretty new. This is in the late 1990s, so it's pretty new system, and it was cloud hosted based system. Just didn't work when you put a big volume on it, and no one can know that because we were probably one of the first of that size. And so after this happened, the day of the cutover, we end up rolling back to the old systems that were in place before. The next day or two, I was told, and I know that I was moping around like a beaten puppy, not really doing the things I should be doing. And finally, the CIO at the company pulled me aside and he said, Georgine, you've got to snap out of this. You are leading this team. People are looking to you, and you've got to get your chin up and move forward. And he was absolutely right. Like, he was like, that moment when I thought, because you're in this leadership role, you don't have the luxury of holding up and licking your wounds. You've got to keep going. You got to step up and bring the team with you. And that's something, and that was just one of many. I was in my 20s at this point and didn't realize that this is not the first or the last time this kind of thing is going to happen. And sure enough, things have happened, but that was the first one, and it really sticks with me. And so now when the next crisis comes, and COVID was definitely one of, I realized immediately, like, I don't need that day or two, and I don't need someone to tell me. I realized that what I do next, what I say, my outlook on solving the problem is extremely critical. So I've got to keep my chin up and keep moving forward. And that will allow all of us to lift each other up and move forward together.
I love that. And such a great lesson too, that as a leader, you've got to take that moment, learn from it, and move on and not dwell on it. One of the things that I know that we have in common, not because we have gotten to collaborate together, but because I have seen and heard you talk in other circumstances, is that your leadership is in many ways a very collaborative environment. And you talked about bringing in others as you assumed a new role in that type of collaboration. But talk a little bit about how you think your leadership has evolved over time. How would you define your own style of leadership, and maybe how others see you as a leader?
Yeah, I think I was young and stupid and type A, hard-headed my first 5+ years of my career. I think a way to summarize, a bit of a know-it-all, and thought I could do a lot more things than I could do alone. And how it's evolved is starting in that mode and thinking a certain way over time, and with experience and with projects, I've realized that you really don't get that far alone. And that's where this collaboration came into play. Once I started learning that we could do a lot more and even do it faster if you brought a team, got everyone on the same page, laid out the vision, and got people to buy into it, you would go much further, much faster. And one of the key books, because I'm a big reader and learner, that's core to my leadership style. One of the books that was really pivotal in flipping the switch in my brain was a book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. One very old book. Almost everybody's read it. I was mid-20s. I finally read the book, and not just read it, but really understood that being right and being a know-it-all is not what you want. That's the opposite of what you want. You want to learn. You want other people to feel right and successful and competent. And so once that was really like ingrained in me, I started to change, or my style changed. Can't say I did it on purpose. It just happened that my style started to become more collaborative. And then I realized that not only should you collaborate with your team, the people you lead, the people you work with, but you should collaborate across the industry. And so that even comes to collaborating with competitors, if you will. So we're basically in an industry, a large industry with a lot of opportunity trying to solve problems. And if we work together to solve problems for hoteliers, their life will be better. There will be enough business for me and for my competitors and for the partners that we're working with in the industry. And the hoteliers get a better product in the end. And if you just keep your eye on that prize and you know that you're going to be rewarded if you build the right thing to solve the problems that the customers need solved, you don't look at it as competitively. It's a lot more collaborative.
And that's such a great point of looking even at your competitors as collaborative opportunities to advance whatever it is in the industry. And I don't want to say I misspoke, but I did say that we haven't had the chance to collaborate. What I meant is we haven't worked together since I have been retired, mostly since you have joined the industry. However, you and I both care very deeply about a similar thing, which is a more diverse industry at the leadership level, really at all levels of the industry. And so last year we had the privilege at the Alliance of welcoming in the Hospitality Women's Innovation Council, which is a brainchild of yours and a few others. Talk about why it is so important to you personally, to your leadership, to the industry, to have more diversity of thought, diversity of voices, and then in the collaborative and why forming the council you thought was important and how it will advance those initiatives.
Yeah, absolutely. 5 years ago, going to the first several conferences in the industry, you look around and not surprisingly, it's mostly men. And a lot of times it's mostly white men in the industry that are on the panels and leading. And I started looking around for where are the women grouping up and supporting each other. And they're now that I'm in 5 years and the work you've been doing and others, it's much easier to find. But 5 years ago, I didn't see much of that at the conference. Like I did, there wouldn't be a working session or a panel that were for women's leadership issues. So I thought, and Michael Frankel was one of the key leaders on this too, his brainchild. He pulled me aside at one of the conferences at Georgine. You've been complaining to me because he was helping us on some other strategic items. He said, you've been complaining a lot about the lack of diversity in leadership in this industry. Why don't you try to do something to change it? And of course, he threw the challenge out and I was like, okay, I'm in. And we brainstormed together, like, how can we do this? What could we do? And he said, why don't we just put an idea out there, set up a meeting at one of the conferences off to the side, invite the women that we know will be there and see if there's an interest. And so we did just that. We had our first meeting. I think it was at the lodging conference in a sidebar there. And 10, 20 women came and they were excited about it. And they were excited to share their ideas and really talk about the problems and challenges that they were facing, not about being women, but just in the industry in general. And then as the word got out, more and more people were like, I want to be a part of that. I want to know what's going on. We don't have any specific agenda. It's more of just trying to get another place for women's voices to be heard. And there's not just women. We have men who attend too, which I absolutely love because I think diversity, like creating a lack of diversity in another place doesn't help with diversity. So we call it the Women's Innovation Council just because we wanted to get more women's voices in, but we welcomed all voices and including Michael's and others. And so it's just one more way to get women talking and understanding and sharing their challenges and maybe helping each other overcome them.
And I think you've made such a good point. Elevating women is not to exclude or to not have a sense of belonging for others. It's really to find opportunity for everybody. So really love that you are doing that. And I know it's important to you on your leadership team, on the teams that you develop and build at the company, as well as what you're doing industry-wide. If I switch gears for a minute, and I used to think that work-life harmony really applied to women, but the more I think about it and the more I reflect on my own situation at home, anyone with a demanding career, whether it be travel or hours or stress or other things, is going to have opportunities and challenges in finding satisfaction in both a personal life and a career. How do you think you have done, looking back over the last 30 years, in finding some sort of harmony that works for you? And what type of lessons have you learned along the way?
Yeah, that's always a challenge. I think back, I think you have a question later, but I might skip ahead on this. I think back to early in my career when I had no children. 10 years of working with no children. I always got irritated or annoyed when people would call in sick or say they've got to go to their kids, this, that, or the other. And I was like, you got a job, you need to do your job. And then I had children also while I was still working. And my whole bit flipped. And I was like, how did they even make it to work as much as they did? Once you have a child, you realize how much work it is and how many things can go wrong and doctors and everything. So anyway, like that definitely evolved with experience. Thankfully, it made me a better leader, having to balance more things. So I think that's a benefit, but I just have learned to not care when exactly someone does their work. So my team is 5 women, 3 men, my direct leadership team. And I've realized that if the freedom, the flexibility to schedule when they do something, whether it's around their kids, take your parents to lunch day or their play or doctor's appointment, and you look at the output of what they do, and instead of when they do it, are they there from 8 to 5, you end up with a better product. And you end up with all of the time you need from the people you have. And so I do the same thing. I mostly try to work during the work week, during our normal hours. But if I need to take off a day for something outside of my normal schedule, I'll pick up some time Sunday morning when everyone else is doing something else. So just like giving flexibility, all the companies that I've led, one of the first things I do from a people perspective is create a DTO policy, discretionary time off, so that they don't have to have 2 weeks and no more and no less and all that inflexibility. We just make it discretionary. And then what I've figured out after that is I have to have a minimum. Instead of people taking advantage of it and taking 6 weeks off, I have to say in the policy, and ours does say that at Visual Matrix, you need to take at least 2 weeks a year off. Because if you don't, if people like what they're doing and they're engaged, sometimes they will not take the time that they need. And I think that the time you need off is really important. It's important to your creativity and your recharging your own batteries. So, just really giving people flexibility and trusting them. And then occasionally there is somebody who'll take advantage. You have to move them out and let them move on to their next opportunity if this is not the right fit for them.
I really like the way you share that you have evolved that over time because your way of thinking evolved, your understanding of those situations evolved, but also in knowing, like you said, that time off is really important. That flexibility is really important to get the best out of your employees and to get the best out of your team, and how important you seeing it firsthand and learning that lesson has been in shaping your leadership. Georgine, I told you when we first spoke that, as always, we will run out of time because there's so many things I want to know about you and your leadership style. But as we wrap up today, one of my favorite questions to ask people is what advice they would give to their younger selves. And the reason I love it so much is I think we are all works in progress, and there's a lot that is developed through reflection, much as you did with your work-life balance conversation. If you reflect back to Georgine taking her first job or first full-time career job to you today, is there any advice you would give to your younger self, either that might make it easier for you along the way or something you wish you knew then that you know today?
I don't know how useful this will be to everyone, but the thing that always pops into my head when this question comes up is, don't be such a punk. I was just a brat, basically. And I was like, oh, I wish I could go back and redo that. But yeah, that's it. Like, just realize that you don't know as much as you think and that you have a lot to learn. And it can be a lot of fun learning it if you'll open yourself up to that, bring in other people, be collaborative. If I could have started that a little bit sooner, it probably would have benefited me sooner. So I think just don't be a punk. That's what I would tell myself.
As we sit here today thinking about the motto of It's Personal Stories, which is empowering personal success, you've shared a lot of your strategies, a lot of your experiences throughout your career. I'm wondering if there's a piece of final advice you'd like to share.
There's some good sayings out there, and I'm really terrible at quoting them, but basically showing up is 90% of the battle. So I would say just keep showing up and building the people around you so that they can do their best. Because if we all build each other, everyone's going to rise up, and that's going to include me and those above me. So show up and do your best, trust people, build people, and help them get to their goals, because that's really going to help everyone.
I love that, showing up and building up yourself and others. As we wrap up here today, Georgine, I am so glad you made the move into hospitality, and I'm super appreciative for your leadership within the industry, what you're doing to lift others in the industry. Appreciate your sharing your journey today and also some of your leadership advice. And to our audience, we know you have a lot of ways to choose to spend your time. So thank you for joining us. You can visit itspersonalstories.com to hear from hundreds of other hospitality industry leaders who have likewise shared their journeys. But Georgine, thank you so much for joining It's Personal Stories today. Have a good afternoon.
You too.